right. Welcome to another episode of Duck It. Today we have with us Clemence, a friend and currently the CEO of Hala Taxi. Thanks for being here, Clemence.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, long time coming. I mean, I've known you for quite a long time. We worked together. We were colleagues for quite a long time. It's so good to finally reconnect and have you on our show. How are you doing? How's it going?
Really good. Thank you. I think you forgot to mention we've had the same job as well.
Yeah. I mean, let's not compete, but I'm sure you do a better job than I do. But yes, we've held the same roles. We've had the same job. So maybe one day you'll also host me on your podcast.
Maybe.
So having said that, I mean, how is Hala Taxi? How does that work? Obviously, it's an organization that has kind of two parents, let's call them. One of them is the rocket ship that we worked at together called Karim, and the other one is the RTA. I've always been aware of the project even back in the day. It took a while to come to fruition. But how does that work? Working for that type of an organization.
So I mean, not to get too commercial, but I think it's the first public-private partnership of this nature between a government entity and a commercial company. And the idea is to be bringing all Dubai taxis on the Karim platform. And this was a long overdue project that customers were really expecting based in Dubai. We just recently expanded to Ras Al Khaimah as well. So that was
Nice.
very exciting news recently. But yeah, the idea is you get your taxi on the app and you have all the app benefits with the cost of the taxi.
Super interesting. And I guess the kind of question and where I wanted to go with this was, for a long time when we were in ride hailing, regulators were almost the enemy. You know what I mean? It was almost like, we have to like bend, how we do things and change how we do things. And the whole idea of this kind of ride hailing world is to get like open up access to transportation and not be bound by regulation. How do you feel now that is that kind of a truth or do you have, a different feeling about that?
I think you were in Karim before me, and I think Karim has always done this differently. So that right? And yeah. I think whatever was necessary to break into these big markets and make ride hailing a model that was viable probably required some disruption at the time, but the Middle East functions very differently. And I think Karim has enabled this really collaborative format. And that's what Hala is all about as well, really, this collaboration. So I think it's possible, and especially in Dubai, where governments are very progressive and really trying to make a difference for people. It's a project that took a long time to really get finalized, but once it was decided, it was really, really quick. I mean, Steve has been involved on the projects. I mean, it's kind of a close relationship that you both have with Hala, right?
Yeah.
I think this collaboration is working well, actually, for people and captains as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was always super optimistic, but I was also super conscious that it went kind of against the grain of the nature of ride hailing as an industry. But I was also super conscious that in order to be able to properly serve, people, you have to work and be very collaborative with regulators. Do you see yourself as somewhat a competitor to other car types in a way? Like, do you compete, do you think?
We don't see it this way. We see us competing with street hailing, actually. So it's more a different way to move. And I think especially now, whoever wants to use a limo will use a limo. Whoever wants to use a bike, like, there's a specific use case to each. But we really see ourselves as competing with street hailing. At the same time, building taxis altogether. I mean, Dubai taxis was a little bit different a few years ago. And so when we took over, we really wanted to be building quality. We wanted to really bring a great service to people. And that was the key focus in the beginning when we launched. And while, quality has always been there on limo, and it's a different price point. It's a different use case. So no, we don't really see us competing.
Okay.
I feel like on the competition now a non-Karima, I do find myself jumping in Halas every so often, and the reason for it is, the reason I used to not like getting in a taxi was because of the cash, having to pay like physical cash, not having a card machine. Card machine wasn't working properly. So now the Hala experience, it's kind of that hybrid between the two. So yeah, I would say that I think if you asked quite a few people in Dubai, especially given where people are today, and everything that's happened, this year, I think people would be a little bit more cost conscious. So, calling a Hala is also beneficial. Not that I'm hating on using a Kareem limit. I do that when I go out in the evenings.
No, I think look, there's people that might say, I feel more comfortable taking this kind of car. I feel more comfortable taking that kind of car. I think it's all about choices in the end. And that's what the UE is all about. And there's people that it's great to have all of these options in one place. But it's true that for us, the main challenge was to allow this price point with a great level of quality. And that was the first fight, really getting this under control, having a great experience.
I'm super curious. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No. I was just going to say one thing that I do notice now, much more in experience, and I think this is a lot of credit to you guys. The drivers or the captains, their behavior or the way that they treat customers is totally different. So that the experience level of what was built in Kareem has transferred across. So ultimately benefiting the end user as well. So I think that there's definitely a shift and change in that. So even if it's not so much a price point perspective, the experience level is completely shifted.
Yeah, I think it's about product market fit. I mean, these are conversations we've had so many times with Chris about product market fit and about use cases, and this was really the first thing that we wanted to land before even looking at expansion, etc. So I mean, obviously things are different now, and there's, with COVID coming into the picture, it's about rebuilding trust, having a good level of confidence, and quality won't be enough. But yeah, if you go back a year ago, because we're a year old now. We've passed our first birthday, so this was the first fight that we had to take.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, because I'm super curious to get your perspective on this, because I don't think it's super clear yet, or companies have kind of decided the route. But COVID has kind of shown us that the world is now different. The world has changed. When we look at even our business as an organization, none of us have been worked in the office since probably mid-February, end of February. And we, to be completely frank, we're only keeping an office because, the regulations say that we need to have an office for our visas. If it wasn't for that, I don't think we would renew our office, rental. And inevitably that carries over to, I think, almost most organizations and all organizations that don't necessarily need to be on location. We've seen companies like Google change their policy. We've seen, companies like Facebook change their policy globally, LinkedIn change their policy, and work from home is something that's here to stay. Because companies have realized that, they can run efficiently and sometimes more efficiently when their teams work from home. So inevitably that has an impact on trips, on rides, and the need for mobility or movement. And, of course, COVID, hurt transport, as an industry as a whole, but also I'm sure for you guys, it must have been really, really drastic. And I guess my question to, cut to the chase, the likelihood of those volumes being achieved again in the short term, maybe even midterm, are quite, challenging. And what is your view on this new world where maybe micro mobility or shorter distances or community movement being the new focus? Is that something that Hala Taxi or, the RTA as a whole is looking into in terms of the next step in evolution of its life?
So there's so many components in this discussion, right? It's such a complex one. But I think there's several things to mention. First of all, in the UAE, I think Uber has reported that there was an increase in ridership higher than March levels, even though the distances were shorter. Interestingly, it's a little bit the opposite here. So here what we see is that distances are actually slightly shorter, but we need to recover in terms of number of trips, number of trips, number of users. So my view is actually a little bit different. I think there's still a role, like there's still a big role to play for ride hailing, but it's a slightly different one. So first of all, I'm actually in the office right now. And second, I think that people will continue to be social beings and will continue to want and need to get around. But the cities will reorganize in a different way. Maybe people are going to leave city centers and they're going to go to houses instead of flats. But because they will move less, they might see that it might not make sense actually to get their own cars. So I think that ride hailing has to readapt to new use cases that might be shorter distances, that might be different times of the day for riding, and that might be different kind of rides. But actually, I mean, we've been very lucky. We've of course we've had an impact, but all things considered, the product market fit we have is good, and we've not been that impacted. And I think what I sense around me is everyone is really waiting for September to come back, for their kids to go back to school, and for having that ability to get around. So to me now, ride hailing is about how do you get people around in a way that makes them feel safe and makes them feel comfortable? How do you provide the transparency about what you're doing to enable people to get around where they need to get around? And that's the new paradigm, I think, for ride hailing now.
So it's kind of like rebuilding that confidence, right? Rebuilding that confidence in movement, mobility. But I think on the point of like shorter distances, when I look at kind of my habits, you're right. I mean, I'm still moving, but my use cases are changing. I'm moving primarily for social reasons and for personal reasons, like different errands or to socialize. And for business, my business use cases or professional use cases have dropped dramatically, at least 95%, to be honest. Commuting to work is not something I do anymore, and or that we intend to do anymore. And even business meetings are now conducted just like this, right? So I agree with you. I think you're right. I think the use cases have shifted, and I think you're making a good point. But on the micromobility piece and the community movement, let's say everything under, let's say 2 kilometers, let's say, is that something that you guys are looking into, or that's not in the cards in the short term?
So no, I think we're going to look into it, but very transparently, we've not had a huge impact on trip distance actually.
So it's not even a priority. It's not even a necessity at this time.
I mean, I think it's great to have, because I think there's always been short trips that needed to be complete. And in Dubai, this was always the case, because you have mass transportation that arrives in specific places. And then how do you get people from the metro back to their homes? But in this new world, people need more door to door. They're not that comfortable in mass transportation. And I think it provides a different opportunity in which ride hailing still is relevant.
Agreed.
So we're going to look, of course, into micromobility, but at the same time, I think the next 2 weeks are going to be very critical for ride hailing. I think Dubai will see how it recovers from that when schools come back as well. But all things considered, it's not necessarily a bad place to be in. I think people might feel more uncomfortable taking a metro right now, etc. So there's some micromobility. People will continue to shift away from the city centers, but they will also continue to get around. So we're looking to both, readapting to those use cases, building trust and transparency, and in those cases, micromobility as well.
I think I mean, thinking a bit broader or kind of further afield, when you think of the transportation aspect, everything that's happened with COVID and the way that we actually are going to work, if you fast forward 10 years from now, what's the inner city going to actually look like, and how is that movement going to be? Because from your perspective, and Karim and Uber, that point of view, that kind of distant viewpoint of the way that people are going to move about, and the way that inner work cities, the 9 to 5, all of that will shift. So to your point, the use cases are going to change.
That's what's going to be interesting. It's how our city is going to be designed now, and also how permanent is this impact. You can see a lot of people getting back to work in full. Probably not 100%, but at least 50%. And there's lots more people moving. So I think the next month is going to be very, very interesting.
I'm currently in Montreal, right? And I've been able to compare how two different countries are dealing with COVID. And I think you recently traveled as well. So it's interesting because when I compare Canada, for example, everyone's at work.
Yeah.
Generally everyone's at work. There's probably still maybe a 15-20% of the population that's really married to the work from home kind of future state, but generally speaking, there's still traffic everywhere. People are still moving about. The way COVID has impacted the day-to-day life is much less than what I would say the UAE is. And to be honest, I'm still more on the UAE side of things. I still feel like I take more precaution. Even when I arrived to Canada, I was a bit like, oh my God, why are people so close? Why are people not taking
They're
this
not wearing
seriously?
their masks
Why aren't they
properly.
wearing their masks? I was freaking
The
out a little
police
bit.
are wearing your mask properly.
Yeah, I was super shocked. So I think you're right. I think we have to wait and see what happens in September and see how society will kind of evolve and adapt to this new
I think
reality.
so.
Yeah.
So I
I
have a
guess.
feeling that people are ready to move back into their lives, and
Yeah.
really there's something at stake here for ride hailing. How do you readapt to
Yeah.
this new mindset?
Yeah.
We really have a role and a responsibility to be providing that transparency, because mass transportation will be more impacted than us. There's no way. And the economic
100%.
situation means that people will want a good product market fit. So we have to find solutions, and we have to make do with this new world, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We have one of our clients at DUCKLIFE. They're a startup that are just about to launch. They're launching with a policy of work from home to begin with. So there will be no office. So it's strange. It's interesting. You have some organizations in some countries that are taking it to the whole next level and almost using it as a platform to kind of build their future. Based on their beliefs of where the world is going, and then you have some organizations or some economies that are just they can't afford to shift so quickly because their economy is a bit more fragile, let's say. So it's going to be super interesting to see how that kind of manifests in Dubai and the UAE in general. I wanted to ask you, on a personal note, and I just wanted to ask. I know you just had another baby, and my little girl is going to be 2 in September. And I always want to ask this question, especially to you, because you have probably way more experience than me now that you're on your second, I believe. I've found fatherhood and running a business and trying to be the best of both very, very difficult to juggle, even personally. And I would say that the dependency or the needs of my daughter Charlotte on me versus Nadia, my wife, is also quite different. So I can't even compare. But given that you run Hala Taxi, that you're a super successful executive, at least in the UAE, and we respect you heavily. I just want to know, how have you managed, right, with COVID, with a newborn, with kids, with a family? How do you juggle these things? What's your kind of view of the world when it comes to that?
It's funny because I was just discussing this with a few people. Like that's a question I tend to get quite a lot, and I mean I'll have the same question for you, right?
Yeah.
Look, I don't know. I think that there's a few things that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make my life as simple as possible, and I try to also be on where I'm needed. So I think everyone who has a family knows that there's a certain amount of time that you need to give to your family, and if you don't give it that time and that attention, then you reach a point where things start to stretch and it starts to break. And I think everyone can sense when they have a family, when they've neglected their families. And I think that at the same time, you also probably have this for your team. And I mean, from my view, there's one thing that I find very, very helpful is to only be on the things at work where I'm needed, and try to empower people to find their own solutions. And at home, I try to not do the things that are not critical so that I can spend the right amount of great quality time with my kids. I don't think you need to be there at work or at home, by the way, all the time and for everything. I was listening actually to a podcast you had with someone before, and that person was saying, I want to be there to solve my team's problems. And I was thinking, I am actually the opposite. I want to empower people to solve their own problems. And the more you build that autonomy, the better it is. So I think it's sort of a combination of both. I mean, I don't know how other people do it. Just at the end of the day, you get up in the morning, you just make it happen, and hopefully it works.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. I don't think there's a magic recipe, and I think the recipe changes based on family or based on objectives. I think for sure. You know, it's funny. Like I think, like the way I would kind of relate to you, and the conversation that I would probably, or the answer that I would probably give is probably a bit more confusing in the sense that I feel like fatherhood is not really defined. It's changing
Yeah.
so quickly. I don't know what a good or a bad father is anymore because that definition is like a moving target. In our generation, and we're all roughly the same age on this call, on this podcast, fatherhood has changed like night and day from between our parents and fathers today, right? So like, I don't even know. I'm not emulating or pretending to be my father because the way he was parenting us was very different to how I'm trying to be present and parent my daughter. So it's strange. Like it's kind of like we're figuring it out. I think from a man's standpoint, at least, I don't know like what it is to be present, or I don't know what it means to be too present. I don't know what it means to be over invested or not investing enough. So it's kind of like a moving target. And to me, it's like, you know, just do what I think it feels right, but I don't know if it's correct. And it also has an impact on my wife because she's the other parent, and we're trying to raise our family together, right? We're trying to build our family together, and figuring out the roles that we play in this family is kind of, you know, we're figuring it out as we go. And it's weird, but COVID has allowed me to be the parent that I wanted to be in my mind, because it meant that I was there for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, for nap time, for bedtime, for bath time, you know. So it's allowed that, but I hope I can keep that moving forward, even whatever this post-COVID or COVID era is. But it's strange. I don't know, you know, how that impacts, you know, mothers and you know, because the father's role is ever changing, right? I don't know if I don't know if you would agree with that, but I feel like my expectation of my role has changed a lot, and COVID has helped me change my expectation and my objective for my role. So I'm wondering if you're feeling that at home as well.
I honestly, I think it's great that you're thinking about that and you have those discussions, because I mean, a lot of the times you get asked, oh, as a woman, how do you make everything happen? And my answer is always, I don't see this as a woman role, and this is a question that we should also ask fathers. And I think the truth to that is that fathers now, men now, want to be more involved and are trying to find a place. And I think that companies don't really always allow for this to be possible. There's kind of, not always, but there's a sort of expectation on women that it's okay, but it's not necessarily possible for men who really want to do that and to make this happen. So I think this is a much more interesting conversation than the typical woman conversation. More this, no, but I really mean it. It's more this logic of saying ideally there's two parents to take care of a child, and what's the role of each, and how do you make it happen with everything else. I do agree that COVID has helped me sort of. I was on maternity leave in the beginning, and so when I went back, I was still able to be there and was able to steal a few more moments with family than I anticipated. And at the same time, it's also harder to put a barrier between work life and professional life. But ultimately, I think it comes down to solving together, and not every man wants to spend that time with the family or knows how. And I think it's probably, as a senior leader, I think it's probably easier to be setting your own rules. I don't know if you agree
Yeah.
with that.
No,
Actually.
completely. And I don't think there is a set of rules, right? I think it's, like you said, when there are two parents, ideally in a family, juggling and understanding each person's role is also organic, right? So today my role might be to do this, and tomorrow my role might be a little bit different based on personal ambitions or objectives that we have. So if I realize I want to grow our business and I have to dedicate more hours in the next 6 months, then the partnership of parenting needs to help.
I
I think that's
love that expression, by the way. I think
yeah.
I completely agree with you. It is a partnership. And I think people want more now. They want to spend more time with their families, but they also want to have the chance to achieve what is meaningful to them at work. And that partnership allows you to sometimes have one that's more involved or another that's more involved in that life, and to know when you can do it and when you cannot. So with younger kids, you might spend a bit more time, and when they're a bit older, you have a school day. There's so much you can do in a school day, actually. So I love that expression of partnership. I think you put
it should never be. I mean, so I've been a non-parent. I've got FOMO, guys, and I'm like, Gabby,
let's make some children.
I'm sure it's nose here. I'm sure it's soon.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that it should never be a trade-off, right? If I think back to the way I can relate to this, so I can think back to being a kid and growing up, and my mum and dad and the two roles that they played. It was very defined in their era of what their roles were. My mum gave up work. She stayed at home with us. She raised us, everything, 100% of the time. My dad, the trade-off to that was that he would basically have to work 20 hours a day. So to see him, there was no balance. It was a complete imbalance.
Yeah.
So to the point of what you guys are talking about, one coming out of the back of this, the balance, everyone's starting to discover that balance. And Chris, yourself, you're like, I like this balance. I don't want to give that back. So, we shouldn't give it back. And then secondly, what does that, how does that change the way companies, leaderships, or people in leadership roles then perceive things like maternity leave, paternity leave? Because systematically, we're already differentiating the two and saying that we give one different weight. So, as organizations, as parents, you start to think, if we want to retain these benefits that come with that partnership, then how do we then change and shift the way that we actually operate companies?
Yeah.
I have a very heated opinion on this. But I'm super passionate about this.
Fuck it, dude.
It drives me mental because I don't want to say that I'm like the world's craziest feminist, but I really have an issue with the way society portrays the role of men and women generally. Especially since I had a daughter, and now I have a family, and now that my priorities are more balanced between professional and personal, I feel like as much as I want to empower and help women, I'm also feeling that society, culturally, societally, and policy wise, is not ready for the progression of our generation, in the sense that when I was on paternity leave, I had 3 days of paternity. Right. And then obviously I stayed, much longer, but I basically did that on my vacation time. Right. So that's fine. But in reality, it kind of forces a family and forces the two partners or the two parents to not have a choice in the role that they want. Right. So essentially, because society and policy is written one specific way, and because it hasn't progressed at the same rate as our generation, then by default, the mothers play a bigger role because the framework of society pushes them in that direction. And then the men, the framework of that society, and for multiple reasons, not just maternity and paternity, for pay scale, for promotion, likelihood, for, sexism and whatever, all the things that can happen because of the way society has kind of been, I would say, it has evolved over the years. And because our generation, all of us, we've progressed so quickly and the policy hasn't kind of followed, we are still victims to roles being predefined. And then when you go against them, you're obviously giving up other sacrifices. right? You have to, right? And inevitably you do, you don't realize them, but you accept them as well, but you have to give up other things, right? Like for example, I mean, I have a certain amount of hours that I've, decided out of my own priority, my own choice to give to Charlotte, right? And to our family, which I cannot give to any professional ambitions that I have. And that's fine, but I've made that choice by myself, not because of society pushing me in that direction. And
Yeah.
to me,
So actually,
yeah,
not to interrupt, that's what I was going to say. I think that the best thing is when you're able to realize that this is a choice that you're actually making.
yes, exactly.
And you do have to make those choices. But generally, what I also think is that as leaders of companies, it's also our job to make it happen and to make it possible for
Exactly.
our teams. And I mean, for example, in Hala, we it's not 2 months of paternity leave like you can have, for example, in Scandinavian countries, but we ended up giving 2 weeks instead for the few parents that had here. And I think our job as leaders is to build that positive leadership that allows for both men and women to be finding the place that they want to find at home and at work.
Yeah.
And I think that flexibility, like COVID has provided some flexibility with the work from home, with the ability to not work in central cities, but to actually live in a home a bit further away. And all of those things will probably end up accelerating the need that men now have to be closer to their families, and thus allowing a bit more parity with giving a bit more space to women to maybe have more space at work as well.
Absolutely.
And I mean, if we can land on this, it would be really amazing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like I think the other reality is that our part of the world is lagging, right? So we are a bit behind the rest of the world in terms of those types of policies societally, right? And even culturally, we're even still a bit behind. But I mean, amongst my friends, I mean, I grew up, I'm from, I'm half Lebanese, but half Canadian, but I spent most of my time in the Middle East. And I find even Arab men are increasingly more involved fathers. So it's actually something that's coming, it's happening. We're definitely not, Swedish or Danish yet, where the men are super involved, taking half a year off and raising their children yet. I would love to get to that point.
Maybe it's coming.
I would love for us to get to that point, but I think
we'll open an office in Scandinavia then when my time's done. I'll go run it.
I figured you'd say that, yeah. But the idea that I think, to Clemence's point, is if we're going to be effective leaders, people don't have to go to Scandinavia to have that lifestyle. We need to be able to make those policies and those changes within the organizations that we run in the region.
I mean, I'd even push. I think we have, as leaders, a responsibility to be doing that. And I think it goes beyond just family. I think there's lots of people who also may decide to not have a family, but have other things they want to achieve or other things that are meaningful to them. And just being able to give that choice for people to find the place that they want to find, I think is really important. I personally am super involved. There's a topic I'm passionate about, so I'm bringing it up. But building a new generation of leaders that have a very positive kind of leadership, that feels inclusive, that feels respectful, is something that's very important to me. I think that people should get up in the morning, and not just women or not just men, and I don't want to advocate one way or another. I think it's about everyone. People should get up in the morning and just be excited with the personal life that they have, and then be able to transition and say, now I've got this job, I love the people, I love the job I have, I want to get to that now, and I'm going to spend the next hours working on this and working on that, and be satisfied having that, and then be also happy coming back home or being home, whatever, in the evening. But I think there's a responsibility for younger leaders to start building that and to show to the next generation that this is possible. And
Clemence, why? So I completely agree with you, but why do you feel that way? Is it that you feel that our generation has really become addicted to a work culture, a predominantly professional culture?
No, actually, I think it's a little bit different. I think it's very personal, but before I actually started working in Kareem, and I mean, we met almost the day I joined, so like you remember those days.
Yeah.
But when I came into Kareem, a job was a job, and you were coming to work, and then you were coming back home, and you were transitioning, and that was it. And I never really, I mean, I always hoped it was possible, but I had dropped it after like 10-ish years of working. I had dropped the idea that you can have a very strong purpose and a very strong level of excitement for the work that you do. And once you start having that and you get hooked on that, it starts to be so much more than just a way to, well, make money. And that's when it started to be important for me. I'm excited with what I do. I'm excited getting up in the morning. I love the people I work with, the ones that I worked with before, like you guys, but the people I'm very blessed to have right now in my team. And I want to make sure that the people around me have this possibility as well, that they're excited with what they have. And at the same time, they're also excited with their personal lives. It doesn't have to be a man-woman thing. It has to be about positive work and positive leadership, I think.
Yeah,
So
I think on
interesting.
the because I think on the well-being part of it as well. I mean, naturally from in leadership roles, you get much more out of a happy team, right? A team that's motivated, a team that's positive, isn't fearful of coming to work, isn't overworked. So there's tons of benefits there. But I think going back to the point that the question that you asked, Chris, whether our generation has become addicted to work, I think there is something in the sense that I think we are more workaholics. We're online permanently, right? These things create that world for us, and we don't necessarily we don't necessarily find the right ways to disconnect. So when it comes to leadership roles and making sure that we create that environment for the team, it's also then thinking, how do you almost push the team into thinking about we've taken wellness days in DUCKLIFE. So we give the team a day off, totally disconnect, close off your work, do not respond to anything that comes in, right? And it's those sort of just those sort of actions. And I think people, when you think about generations that are coming through the workplace, working remote, working from longer periods of time, working at a younger age, forcing them into this wellness perspective is going to be important from a leadership point of view in terms of given that experience. Because I actually think without kind of that encouragement, that active encouragement, I don't know if people will disconnect to the way that we would.
Yeah, I mean,
should.
I think it's interesting. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Clemence.
No, especially with work from home, the limit starts becoming blurry. So when are you working, when are you not working? It's not something that I find weighs me down, but I know there's some people that feel very strongly about where the boundaries are and are not very happy with work eating into their personal lives. But when you work from home, personal eats into your work life, and so it's a two-way street, and that's also something that will happen.
And yeah, what I was gonna say is that I don't think there's an answer to it, because I agree with both of you. I agree, Clemence, that like once you find something you love and you work with people you love and you find something that you're purposefully aligned with and values aligned with, all of a sudden being able to distinguish between professional and personal is very hard, because you just love it so much, so it doesn't feel like work anymore. But at the same time, that's a double-edged sword, because you love it so much you don't know how to turn it off. Plus, it's in your pocket all the time. It's on your phone, it's on your email, it follows you everywhere. So your ability to disconnect and your want to disconnect is also less and less present. So I think we're a society where, we're a lot more purpose driven, we're a lot more values driven probably than the previous generations are, but we're a lot more connected than we used to be. And inevitably that's great, but that's also a risk, right? That's a risk that, maybe we might be doing or living unhealthy lifestyles without even realizing it.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah. So and like a couple of weeks ago, I somebody asked me, what are your ambitions? What do you want to do? When are you going to know when enough is enough? When are you going to be happy? And And it's funny. My answer was quite simple. I still don't know what I want to do in life. I still don't know what I'm going after because I'm not really going after anything. You know, I'm trying to make sure that every day that I'm living, I'm doing everything that I want to do. Like people ask me, you
But then
know,
that means that you're happy now, and that's, I
exactly.
mean, happiness has to be about this. It
It-
has to be about now. If you're not happy now, don't expect that you'll be happy in 10 years. It doesn't work
ex-
this way.
exactly. And that's what I think fundamentally our society and our generation does not understand. We've grown up and we've lived in a world where we see perfect pictures on Instagrams and fancy cars and nice clothes and these perfect lives depicted, you know, supposedly to reflect reality, but are absolutely not. And I think a lot of people are chasing these dreams that are not really real. And I noticed that when that question came to me, I said, you know, it's weird. Like I still don't know what I want to do in life. I have no idea what it is I want to do. I've found things that, you know, I'm good at, and that we can succeed at, but there's not generally anything that I'm chasing, right? So I think that's predominantly the problem or the challenge of our society these days, rather than trying to fix the problem of work-life balance. I think it's people need to be able to understand that you don't need to chase something to be happy, and that happiness is absolutely a choice. Clemence, you sent us a message. Let's
Yes.
take a
Yes,
pause. We'll let you turn on the lights. We need to see your face.
Thanks.
it's fine because it's very easy to edit, so don't worry. Or we can just leave this bit in and we can just
No,
follow you
I
on the
think we'll
office.
leave
Just
it.
I
yeah,
hadn't
Yeah.
considered I'd be alone in the office and that there was no,
yeah.
it's just a joke.
It was so funny actually just watching like you would
I was
just
like,
disappear
The
and it was like,
darkness. Yeah.
like,
she's gone.
That's amazing.
Hilarious.
But
okay,
yeah, I think on that point,
this is just better.
yeah.
There we go.
Oh, there she is. Oh no no. But yeah, I think my perspective on the whole conversation, just to, you know, close this topic, is that I don't think the answer will be in finding a way to manage work-life balance. I don't think the answer will be in trying to find ways to manage purpose and professionalism or stuff like that. I think the answer is, you know, our generation needs to know what's real or not, and our generation needs to focus on what actually makes them happy in the moment, rather than chasing a carrot at the end of a stick for the rest of their life, right? So
And you know,
yeah,
it's funny because I don't know about you. You've been hiring. I've been hiring a lot, and I mean, we had to build a team in just 3 months. And you ask people, and you can see why people are working, what they hope to get out of work, and you can see that there's so many people that haven't been able to identify really yet what is going to make them happy and why they do what they do. And working with purpose seems to be something that's just, it's people don't know what that means.
no,
And once you, it's really about self-discovery and really about making sure that you make this possible for yourself. I mean, I'm not going to say how old I am, but I mean, I've had some experiences, and it took me a good 10 years to figure out
yeah,
how I make my day meaningful. And that's really something that we should all engage in, our generation and the younger one. I know that they're very passionate about this topic, but a lot of times I interview people, they're like, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want this, I don't want, but they don't really know what they want either.
No.
And that's going to evolve. I just sometimes, you know, I look at my baby who's born in January 2020, and when I put a mask on, he's so happy because it means we're going out, you know. And I feel sad. I feel
Habibi.
really sad. I hope that his generation is going to be able to be much stronger about knowing what they want and how they're going to get it. I hope they'll be stronger at finding this balance and finding meaning in what they do.
Yeah, I think just on that as well, it's finding the, again, both of what you two are saying is correct. Finding that happiness, the thing that just keeps you energized when you go back to the positivity piece, making sure that you feel like you're getting up in the morning to do something that you want to do. Because I think what people want is always going to change. And I think fearing the fact that I don't know what I want, that creates anxiety, which then has a detrimental effect from, you know, you think about your happiness and your positivity. Accepting that as you go through that journey, whether it be in your career or in your personal life, accepting that your wants and needs and motivations are going to change, and with technology and the way that we operate today are going to change much more frequently than they did in the past. Accepting that, you know, at a base layer is probably a really good step into then figuring out, or then accepting what it is that you're trying to achieve on a, you know, on a smaller time scale, what motivates you, what keeps you happy. And I think that itself is future generations, your kids, my future kids that will be here eventually, you know, hopefully will benefit from.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say, sorry, on this point is, I also feel like the way I would raise a child for this world, and the way that I'm trying to do it is allowing a space for that person to be them. What I'm increasingly afraid of, especially in the world that we live in today, there's a lot of, I want to be like him, or I want to be like her, or I want to be like that, or I want to be like this. And you know, being able to distinguish real from not is super difficult today. When you look at the way social media plays, you know, a fundamental role in our society, you know, it changes our politics, it changes our entertainment, it changes our knowledge, it impacts everything that we do today. It's what scares me is trying to create a space to allow a person to develop into their own self, rather than be a reflection of a fake reality.
Yeah,
right?
what they believe expectations are of themselves.
Exactly. And that's what I'm the most conscious of, I think, in this generation versus when we grew up. When we grew up, we were a product of our experiences rather than a product of our content consumption, right? So I feel like, you know, I spent at least 12, 14 hours a day outdoors playing, I think, until I was like a teenager. Whereas I rarely see kids, you know, outside playing the way we used to. And maybe I'm not exposed to it. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I feel that this generation, this society is so connected to a world that is, you know, surreal. And that impact scares the crap out of me. So to me,
You
that's
know,
what
if I was to do what I do to you quite often, and we go super deep in that, I would then throw at you that world that you're trying to create almost indirectly shapes that world.
Of course,
Right. So,
of course,
you
no,
know,
of
but
course,
at the same time, yeah, to the point that you're trying to make, it's the, you're trying to remove that heavy influence that then dictates. But then I think it's a large part of that just comes down to just that awareness, just,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
allowing it to happen, because kids, they can't not be exposed, right?
No, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
I think, you know,
Like,
I agree with you that I find this scary. And at the same time, I mean, how many things have changed? I mean, our grandparents say they lived so differently than their parents, and then again our parents, and then again us. And every time there's something that might feel scary, I think kids tend to adapt as well. So I think as parents, you have a role to make sure that you give them the self-confidence that they can find themselves in the middle of that and reinvent themselves. I think they're smarter than we think about this, obviously. But to be fair, I don't know, my kids are too young to be exposed to social media heavily.
Yeah.
So I'm not, I mean, you know what they say, small kids, small problems, big kids, big problems.
It's terrifying as a statement. It's only going to get more difficult.
But yeah, I think if we think back of the workplace and the people that we hire, I really hope that our generation, like our kids' generation, will be able to find a good place here. But then again, we're talking about work from home. Maybe in 3 years, it will be meaningless. Maybe we'll have learned to live with that as we've learned to live with so many other things.
Absolutely. No,
maybe these things will do our work for us, and we just like live in a happy.
We all become artists, and
yeah.
and
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I'd take up cooking. I'd cook way more.
Yeah.
Forget like
Don't
sitting
you
now
find
and
that you're more productive in that context, by the way?
work from home.
I'm way more productive.
I mean, working from home,
100%.
email, like I really feel that if we manage to be strong about just doing the things that have an impact and not just jumping on every single topic, you actually get much more done.
I think the secret word, and I say this a lot, and I've heard it a lot, is it's forced discipline, right? So when you walk into an office, it's easy to get carried away and have conversations, to catch up with people and stuff like that. But when you're at home and your child is on the other side of the door and you really want to spend time with them and you only have a limited amount of time to do stuff, all of a sudden miracles happen, right? I'm able to do what I do in 2 hours, probably would take me a full day in an office because I'm at home. Right?
I'll go even one step further than you. Personally, I think that having children has made me a better leader. Yeah. I mean, I'm a really strong believer in this because now, so I think first of all, it developed a lot my level of empathy for people around me. Sure. Because I need to be able to position myself in the other person's mindset to try and understand the issue or the discussion, that their point of view. So I think that's the first thing that is done for me. And the second thing is that it also made me much more effective. And I think maybe it's a new thing, maybe it's not. I don't know why I'm not a man, but the fact that fathers now are also faced with that home interaction, and a lot of them are telling me, I saw a side of my child I never saw before, and it's really cool. And I think that's the second thing that's going to come is that we're going to learn to put our foot down and be more effective. Yeah, I mean, I know that when I had it happening, the being at home will do that as well. You have to be more effective.
No, 100%. It's also because you're wearing two hats, right? And you almost have to juggle between the two. And the only way you can do that successfully is to be more effective, more disciplined, quicker in your decisions. I love your point about empathy, though. I can completely support that. My empathy capabilities have, I don't know if Steve. Yeah, I knew Steve would do that.
Sorry.
But yeah, I feel like my empathy has gone through the roof, which to Steve's point might have meant that I was a monster before that. But anyways, I just
no, it is noticeable, dude. I'm being a dick, right? It's very noticeable.
You said it, not honestly. Me. There we go. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I completely agree with that. It's funny how that works, eh? It's funny how that works. Emotionally, I'm also way more in tune with who I am, what matters to me, what means a lot to me. It's funny when you have children. It's just, I don't know why you get so much more emotional.
I think your sense of priority becomes a lot more clear as well. Yeah. But to me, it was the empathy. I was just stunned by how much more empathy you start building. And I mean, I think that this made me a better person, very honestly. Yeah. And how I interact with others. That doesn't mean I want to stay, spend so much time. I don't want to be there all the time, but I want to be there for the good stuff, and I don't want to miss out on it. And I think it's not a man-woman thing. It's really it's a person thing. Yeah. And that definitely did that.
I completely agree. Clemence, we've had you on for more than we promised we would have you on for. So I think I think that ticks the box on this being a good episode. So I just wanted to thank you very much. We loved having you on. Hopefully we'll have you on again, probably in season 3, and see how you're doing.
That would be awesome.
But thank you so much for coming on Duck It. We really appreciate it. And we have to see you socially and catch up when we're back all in the same city. But thanks again. Thanks for, being on the show. Thank you very much.
Great discussion. Really appreciate it.
Likewise. Awesome. Don't forget to turn the lights off when you leave the office.
Yeah, so sorry.
No. Thanks, Clemence. Take care.
Cheers.
See you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.